It was an ordinary day, one of those days that blurs into the other's gray sky, the faint chill of early morning, and the hum of life moving around me without urgency or excitement. I was at the train station, sitting on one of the worn wooden benches, my bag at my side, lost in my own thoughts. People bustled past, their footsteps echoing off the high ceiling, announcements crackling overhead in a voice that felt both urgent and indifferent. I wasn't expecting anything, no surprises, no changes, just another commute. I had been staring absently at the yellow safety line on the platform, my mind wandering somewhere far from the station, when I heard a voice. Is this seat taken? I looked up, and for a brief moment, the noise of the station seemed to fade. She was standing there, holding a book in one hand and adjusting the strap of her bag with the other. Her hair framed her face in soft waves, and there was a lightness in her expression, like she carried a piece of summer with her despite the gray morning. But it was her smile that caught me, warm, open, and oddly familiar. I had never seen her before, and yet, something in that smile felt like a memory, as if I had known her once, long ago, in another place, maybe even another life. No, I said, my voice catching just slightly. It's not taken. She thanked me and sat down, placing her book in her lap. For a moment, we just sat there in silence, the sounds of the station filling the space between us, the murmur of conversations, the metallic rumble of a departing train, the distant hiss of steam from the coffee kiosk. I tried to focus on nothing, but my mind kept circling back to her. Her fingers tapped lightly against the cover of her book, as if keeping time to a song only she could hear. Every so often, she glanced around the platform, her gaze calm but searching, like she was taking in every detail. I wanted to say something, anything to keep this moment from feeling like it might slip away. But my mind, usually so full of words, felt strangely empty. She broke the silence first. It's busier than usual today, she said, her tone light, almost conversational. I glanced around. Guess everyone decided to travel at the same time. She smiled again, and I caught that same flicker of recognition inside me, like finding a familiar tune hidden in a new song. Our conversation drifted from there. Nothing deep, nothing extraordinary, just small talk about the weather, the delays, and the book in her hands. But beneath it all was something I couldn't quite define. A pull. The arrival bell rang, and a gust of cold air swept across the platform as the train slid into place. People surged forward, jostling for position, but we stayed where we were. For a moment longer, as if both of us wanted to delay the inevitable. When we finally stood, I let her step ahead of me, watching as she found a seat by the window. I hesitated for a moment, then sat across the aisle from her. The train began to move, the city sliding past in blurred colors. She opened her book, but every now and then, I'd see her glance out the window, her eyes distant, thoughtful. I wondered what she was thinking. By the time my stop arrived, I knew one thing for certain: this wasn't just another morning. Something about her, about the way our paths had crossed so effortlessly, had lodged itself in my mind, and as I stepped off the train, I realized I was already hoping, without quite knowing why, that I'd see her again. The train rattled forward, swaying gently with each turn of the tracks. Outside the window, the city blurred into muted colors: brick walls, graffiti, flashes of green parks, and the occasional glint of sunlight between buildings. Inside it was warm, a low hum of chatter mixing with the rhythmic clatter of wheels on steel. She had started reading as soon as she sat down, but it didn't last long. At first, it was a casual glance from me toward her book cover. Then, she caught me, looking, and smiled. "You've read this one?" she asked, tilting the cover so I could see. I had. And just like that, the conversation began. We talked about books, our favorites, the ones that had changed us, the ones we'd started and never finished. She confessed she'd read the ending of more than one mystery novel before getting past the first few chapters. I told her I was the opposite. I lingered on the first pages, reading them over and over, as if the beginning could tell me how the ending would feel. From books, we drifted into music. She liked indie folk, the kind of songs that sounded like they were meant to be played in small rooms with dim lighting. I leaned toward older rock records, but we found overlap in a shared love for acoustic guitars and lyrics that felt personal. She told me about a song that always made her cry, and I admitted there was one that made me feel homesick even when I was home. It felt effortless, like the words didn't need to be pulled out, they just came. One topic spilled into the next. Favorite coffee shops, late night walks, how rain could make a city feel like a memory. We discovered that we both had a strange fondness for train rides, not because they were convenient, but because they gave you the rare chance to just be. She laughed easily, the sound low and warm, and every time she did, I felt like the world outside faded a little further away. I caught myself studying the way her eyes lit up when she got excited about something, the way she leaned forward just slightly when she was fully engaged in a story. The hours slipped past without either of us noticing. Stops came and went, passengers got on and off, and still, we stayed in our little bubble to strangers talking like we'd known each other far longer than the length of this train ride. Eventually, the conductor's voice crackled over the speaker, announcing her stop. She glanced toward the window, then back at me, that same soft smile on her face. "Well," she said, closing her book but not looking away from me, "this has been unexpectedly nice." "Yeah," I agreed, my voice quieter than I meant. "It has." She stood, adjusting her bag over her shoulder. "Maybe we'll meet again." It was said lightly, like a passing thought, but something about the way she looked at me made it feel heavier, more like a hope than a possibility. I wanted to tell her that I didn't believe in coincidences anymore. That I had the strange, unshakable feeling this wasn't just some random moment we'd both forget in a week. But the train was already slowing, and the moment to say it passed. She gave me one last glance before stepping off the train. I watched her through the window as the platform slid past, her figure getting smaller until it was gone, and yet, even after she disappeared from view, I couldn't shake the certainty settling in my chest. This wasn't the last time I'd see her, not by chance, not by accident. Something told me our paths were already set to cross again. Days had passed since our train ride, but her voice, her smile, and the way her eyes lit up in conversation lingered in my mind like a favorite song. I couldn't stop replaying. I told myself not to think too much about it after all. The city was big, and our paths had only crossed twice, but a small part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was pulling us back toward each other. That feeling proved itself right one quiet afternoon. I ducked into a small cafe on a side street, the kind of place you'd only find if you were looking for it. The warm air inside was rich with the scent of coffee beans and freshly baked pastries, a welcome contrast to the brisk chill outside. The place was calm, just a soft murmur of conversations and the occasional hiss of the espresso machine. And then I saw her. She was sitting by the window, a cup of coffee cradled in both hands, her gaze lost somewhere beyond the glass. Light from outside spilled over her face, turning her hair into a halo of gold and soft shadow. She looked so at ease, so perfectly in place, that for a moment I didn't move. It was too perfect to be accidental. I made my way over, my heart thudding louder with each step. When I reached her table, I leaned slightly forward and said, "Looks like fate's working overtime." She looked up, and when recognition flashed in her eyes, her whole expression warmed. "Well, hello again," she said, a smile tugging at her lips. I gestured toward the empty chair across from her. "Mind if I join you?" "Not at all," she said, motioning for me to sit. We picked up the conversation as if no time had passed. She told me she came here often, that the coffee was good, but the real reason she liked it was the quiet, the way it felt like the world slowed down inside these walls. I told her I'd stumbled in by chance, chasing warmth and a moment to breathe. She laughed softly. "Maybe not entirely by chance." I smiled, starting to think you're right. We talked about the days since we'd last seen each other. She'd finished the book she'd been reading on the train and was already halfway through another. I told her about a song I'd been listening to on repeat, the kind of melody that stuck to your bones. From there, we wandered into talk about travel, places we wanted to see, places we'd already been. It felt just like it had on the train, effortless. Every word, every pause, carried an ease that made the minutes melt away. I noticed the little things again, the way her fingers curled around her cup, the way she leaned in slightly when she was really listening, the quiet spark in her eyes when something made her happy. At one point, the sunlight shifted, spilling across the table and making the steam from her coffee visible in soft swirls. She caught me looking, and for a second, neither of us said anything. "What?" she asked, tilting her head. I shook my head with a small smile, just thinking fate might be real after all. She didn't look away. "Maybe it is," she said quietly. By the time we left the cafe, the sky was beginning to darken, the air cooler now. We walked together for a while before parting ways, promising to meet again soon, not to leave it to chance this time. And as I watched her disappear into the crowd, I knew that whatever this was, it wasn't something I wanted to leave in fate's hands alone. After the calf, we stopped pretending it was fate alone bringing us together. Our meetings were no longer happy accidents, they were choices. And each time we chose to see each other, it felt like choosing a piece of happiness. Id started small. She texted me one morning. Coffee later? I said yes without hesitation. We met at the same cafe by the window, and it felt strangely like coming home to something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. That turned into another coffee 2 days later, and then another. Soon, it wasn't just coffee. We began meeting for evening walks along the quieter streets of the city, the kind where the air felt softer and the sound of our footsteps was the only thing marking the time. Sometimes we talked for hours, about everything from our favorite childhood memories to our least favorite foods. Other times we didn't talk much at all, just walk side by side, the silence between us easy and full. One weekend, we watched the sunset from the hill near the river. The sky was a canvas of gold and pink, and the light caught in her hair in a way that made me stop mid-sentence. She noticed and smiled, not the polite kind, but the kind that felt like it was just for me. These weren't just meetings anymore. They were moments that stitched themselves into my days, becoming part of my routine in the most natural way. And with each one, I found myself looking forward to her presence more and more. I began to notice the little things about her, the way she always ordered her coffee a touch too hot, the way her nose crinkled when she laughed at something unexpectedly funny, the way she'd pause mid-story to make sure I was still listening, as if I could be anywhere else when she was speaking. She noticed things about me too. She teased me about my tendency to hum when I was thinking. She remembered how I liked my coffee without me ever telling her twice. She even pointed out that I always slowed my pace when crossing streets. No matter how quiet they were, there was a shift happening between us, subtle but undeniable. We still kept the conversation light most of the time, but there was a depth forming beneath it, like the current under calm water. One evening, as we were walking, she glanced at me and said, "You know, I didn't expect to meet someone who makes the city feel different." I raised an eyebrow. Different how? Like it's softer, she said simply. Like it's less noisy. Her words sat with me long after I walked her home that night, because that was exactly how I felt too. The world seemed less harsh when she was in it, the edges smoothed, the weight lighter. It struck me that these choices to meet for coffee, to walk in the evenings, to watch the sunset were building something fragile but strong, like glass that was tempered, not breakable. I didn't say anything about the shift I felt, not yet. But I knew this was no longer about fate's reminders. This was about us choosing to be in each other's lives, and about me quietly realizing that I didn't just want her in my days, I needed her there. And every time I chose to see her, I was also choosing the warmth and joy she brought into my life. The air by the river was cool that evening, carrying the faint scent of the water and the distant hum of the city. We'd decided to meet there after dinner, bringing 2 cups of coffee from the cafe we both loved. The sun had already set, and the city lights were beginning to shimmer against the dark water, dancing in long, wavering streaks. We found our usual spot on the low stone wall that ran along the riverbank. It wasn't planned to be our spot, but somehow, we always ended up there. The view was perfect, just enough distance from the noise, but close enough to feel connected to the heartbeat of the city. She was sitting beside me, her legs crossed, her hair catching the faint glow of the nearby lamppost. Every so often, she'd point out something, an unusually shaped building across the river, the reflection of a passing boat's lights, the way the wind made ripples look like shifting silver. I wasn't saying much. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was too aware of the moment. The warmth of the coffee in my hands, the sound of her voice weaving through the night air, the easy way we fit together in the silence between sentences. And then, without warning, the thought came, this is it. Not in the sense of a fleeting, pretty moment, not as a passing romantic notion. It was deeper, more certain. This is the person I've been looking for without knowing it. I turned to look at her, the words locked safely inside my mind. She was gazing at the water, completely unaware of the small, seismic shift happening in my chest. The lamplight softened the edges of her face, highlighting the curve of her smile and the way her eyes seemed to hold their own light. It hit me then how strange life could be. Fate had introduced us first at the train station, then again on the train, then in that cafe that felt too perfect to be coincidence. But fate only opened the door. It was my heart that had decided to stay, my choice to keep showing up, to keep finding reasons to see her again. She glanced at me suddenly, catching me looking. "What?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. I shook my head with a small smile. "Nothing. Just thinking." "About what?" I hesitated, then went for the safest answer I could give without spilling everything. "About how the city looks different from here." "Better." She nodded slowly, her gaze returning to the water. "Yeah, it's like you can breathe a little easier here." We fell into a comfortable quiet after that. The world around us kept moving, cars crossing the bridge, people walking along the path, the steady ripple of the river, but inside that small circle of light by the lamppost, it felt like time had slowed. Every now and then, her knee would brush against mine, and I'd feel a flicker of something electric, the kind of feeling that made you aware of every inch of space between you. I thought about telling her then, right there by the river, how I felt, how every meeting had only made me want more, how being with her felt less like finding something new and more like recognizing something I'd been missing all along. But I stayed quiet. There would be a right moment, and when it came, I wanted it to be perfect. For now, I was content to sit there beside her, coffee in hand, the city lights stretching endlessly ahead of us, because in that moment, I knew I wasn't just passing through her life, I was choosing to be part of it. The night sky was clear in a way it rarely was in the city. Stars glittered above us, faint but determined, peeking through the soft haze of light from the streets below. We were walking home after another long evening by the river, our steps slow, neither of us in a hurry to say goodbye. The streets were quiet. Every few moments, a car would pass, its headlights spilling across the pavement, but otherwise, it was just the sound of our footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. In the cool breeze, I had been carrying the words for weeks, maybe months. They sat heavy in my chest, pressing harder every time she laughed, every time her eyes found mine in the middle of a conversation, every time her hand brushed against mine like it was testing the possibility of staying there. I'd told myself to wait for the right moment, but the truth was, there was no such thing. The moment was whenever I was brave enough to take it, and tonight, with the stars overhead and her walking beside me, I felt that courage finally settle in. I slowed my pace until we were almost standing still. She noticed immediately, turning to face me, her hair shifting in the breeze. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft, but there was a flicker of concern in her eyes. I shook my head. "Nothing's wrong," I said, though my voice was lower than usual. For a second, I looked down at the ground, my thoughts tumbling over each other. Then I met her gaze again, the rest of the world slipping away until there was only her. "I think I've fallen for you," I said. The words weren't as polished as I'd imagined them in my head, but they were real. My voice carried the weight of them, the truth of every moment that had led me here. She didn't look surprised. Not exactly. Instead, a slow, gentle smile formed on her lips, the kind that made my chest ache in the best way. "I think I knew," she said quietly, her eyes holding mine. "But I wanted you to say it." Something in me loosened, like I'd been holding my breath for far too long. I let out a small laugh, not from humor, but from the relief and warmth flooding through me all at once. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. The silence between us was different now, not the quiet of uncertainty, but the quiet of understanding. We kept walking, but this time, her hand found mine. It wasn't tentative or hesitant, it was certain, warm, and steady. Her thumb brushed lightly over my knuckles, a small gesture that somehow carried more meaning than any words could have. The night around us felt changed. The street lamps cast their golden glow across the sidewalk. The cool air felt softer, and the stars above seemed just a little brighter. Every now and then, I'd glance at her, and she'd glance back, and we'd share the kind of smile that said we know. We knew that something between us had shifted for good, that whatever this was before, it had deepened into something we couldn't or would end single quotes t-undo.by the time we reached her building. We still hadn't said much. She turned to me before going inside, her eyes lingering like she didn't want the moment to end either. "Good night," she said softly. "Good night," I replied, my voice warmer than it had been in a long time. As I walked home under that starry sky, my hand still carried the memory of hers, and my heart carried the quiet certainty that this was only the beginning. Looking back, it's easy to say fate brought us together. The train station, the book in her hands, the conversations between stops, it all felt too perfectly timed to be coincidence. Maybe fate opened the door, but it didn't keep it open. What kept it open was us. Every day since that first meeting, we'd made choices. Small ones at first, choosing to meet for coffee, to walk by the river, to watch sunsets together. Then bigger ones, choosing to share more of ourselves, to let the walls down, to trust that what we were building was worth the risk. It wasn't just about falling in love. Falling was the easy part. Staying, that took something else entirely. There were mornings when I'd wake up to a message from her, nothing more than good morning or a photo of the sunrise she'd caught on her way to work. And there were evenings when we'd meet just for a short walk, not because we had anything important to say, but because the day didn't feel complete without seeing each other. Those were choices, deliberate, everyday decisions to keep showing up for one another. It wasn't always perfect. There were days when one of us was tired or distracted, when life pulled us in different directions. But even then, the choice was there to stay, to hold on, to be patient with each other. One night, months after that first confession under the stars, we found ourselves back at our spot by the river. The city lights shimmered across the water, and a gentle breeze carried the sound of distant music from somewhere down the path. She was leaning against me, her head resting on my shoulder, and I realized how far we'd come from that first accidental conversation on the train. You ever think about how easily we could have missed each other? I asked. She lifted her head slightly, giving me a small smile. Sometimes, but I think we would have found each other anyway. Fate? I teased. She shook her head gently. Choice? I thought about that for a moment and realized she was right. Fate had been the spark, but it was our choice that had kept the fire alive. We could have let those early meetings fade into memories. We could have left it at polite smiles and casual chats. But we didn't. We chose. We chose to meet again, to learn each other's rhythms, to share our fears and our dreams, to stand beside each other when it would have been easier to walk away. And that choice made all the difference. As we sat there by the river, I realized something else. Love isn't just about grand moments. It's built in the ordinary ones. In bringing her coffee the way she likes it. In her texting me to wear a jacket because it's colder than I think. In holding hands while crossing a busy street. In remembering the little things that make the other person feel seen. These were the pieces that made up our love. Not fate, not chance, but deliberate acts of care, repeated over and over. When we finally stood to leave, I took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth of her fingers curling into mine. We walked back through the city, the glow of the street lamps lighting our path, and I realized that I didn't just love her for who she was. I loved her for the life we were choosing to build together, one small decision at a time. Fate had brought us together, but love, real love, was in the choice we made every day to keep each other, no matter what life threw our way. And that choice, I knew, would always be ours to make.